Let me see a show of hands in the house tonight of all the engineers. It's quite a few of you. I'm also an engineer, and I'm working in the private sector. Most of the time, I work with men. They're the people that are in the business I'm in. And more often than not, they're also white men. So you could argue that we're not necessarily very representative of what society is today. But it is to us that we're given from the business the big data, and we're asked to do something with it, help the business with it. And so usually, the question I ask myself was, can you give me some guidance, sort of what is it that you'd like me to do with the big data and help the business? And it usually comes along in 3 areas. It's either help the top line, okay, so I'm looking for new markets or new products. It's either about finding ways to remove cost, so it's about productivity and looking at resources, or it's about finding ways to bring value to the customer. Okay, that's always a little bit more complex. And then the other piece that usually comes in is, by the way, do it in a way that's disruptive, because that, in a way, brings everything together. It's something new, it's something cost-effective, and it will bring value to the customer. So as we look at this problem, one of the pieces of guidance that I would like also to have received is some form of charter, of a moral charter that would say, how far can I go with this solution that I want to build with this big data and try and help the business? So in the team that we're working in, we have a multi-discipline team across all the different business units. And because so much has already been done in manufacturing and in logistics in all the other areas, we're sort of working in the next phase or the next wave, which is everything to do with selling online and how we can provide more information and selling online. So to be able to do that in a way that makes sense and that is appropriate for what we want to offer, one of the things that I did was visit a lot of customers to understand what it is that the salesman talks to the customer about and how he goes about it. And I want to share with you one particular day because I found it really interesting how the day went. We had planned to visit 2 different customers, and I had the data sheets with me. They looked pretty much the same. They had a similar mix of machine fleet. They sort of had the same age of these machines. Both customers were buying more or less the same amount of products with the same frequency. And they were also looking from us to see if we could give them information to help their business go ahead better. So it was really interesting. If I'd gone with the data, they looked very, very similar. But in the morning, we visited this first customer in Germany. And as soon as the salesman went in, you would think it was just a hurricane, a buzz of activity. The customer was all the time on the phone, and he was constantly putting it up and down at the same time as the salesman was trying to get a word in Edway. And so the salesman very quickly came to the point where he gave him a quote and said, I know your business, I know your productivity levels. I think right now you can't afford looking at this machine, this offer, and look at buying something. And he left, and they agreed to talk about it later. In the afternoon, we visited another customer, and it was a completely different thing. In the afternoon, when we went to the customer, he spoke very softly and started very slowly the conversation. He first asked him how his wife was doing, because she hadn't been very well. And then he asked him, how is your son doing with his studies? Because he was looking, this customer, for his son to hopefully take over the business. Then he started asking him little questions like, how is business going? How is productivity coming along? And then very, very slowly build it up to the point where he said, I have a machine that could be useful for you. You might want to look at it and consider it. Let me leave the quote. So as I went back to the team afterwards and trying to really dissect all these different interviews, we said, okay, we've got the same data to start with, and we ended up with the same result, which was providing a quote to the customer. But how did he go about it? Can you tell me the elements that were relevant from these customer visits? And so we started trying to dissect it and say, well, which piece of information did he bring first? How did he introduce this topic? So that we could somehow build a process around it and put it online, which is what we're looking to do. But in the discussion, we also said, At what point do we actually need the salesman in this process? What is he bringing today? And so the team was sitting there having to make a sort of decision or a call. Do we completely exclude the salesman? And what does that mean at the end to the business? One of the thoughts that we had is that then we're becoming really just more of a transaction. We're moving away from a relationship into that transaction on the sale. And as you're moving away from the relationship to the transaction, you're establishing more of a process, and it's becoming even to the extent of just being a checklist of different steps that you're having to comply with. So then you ask yourself, is it really what I want it to come down to a checklist of steps of how I'm going to sell to a customer? Is that what I want? And then thinking further ahead, in 10 years, what would that checklist look like? Because the people that are now managing it and updating it and evolving it have not necessarily had that dialogue with the customer to understand where it originated from. My father, he was working for a long time as freelance in the tourist industry. And in the tourist industry, that's an area that definitely has been impacted also with all the online selling. You can now buy your tickets, print your tickets. You can now look at going to hotels and trips that are far, far away that you probably never considered before. And you could argue also that it took part of his business away, but you could also argue that thanks to that, he actually found a niche that he could work in that added a different type of value. But the question I ask is it all about, at the end, having that cheaper ride to the airport and having a cheaper bed to sleep in? Is that what we're looking to build when we're looking at building online? Or are we actually trying to do something different and bigger in this area? How do I know in 10 years that this platform that I'm generating today, that I'm feeding with information as I'm interacting on it, is not going to become something else? So as the web designers and the platform designers are thinking about this, the wish that I would have for them is they think of the values that they build in big data. Because the information that I'm handing over, I'm not handing over lightly.